Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's nothing like starting the break session when you almost thought you were getting out of here. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. I am really excited to be here to introduce the next panel. But before I do, I wanted to take a quick second to just share a little bit about the work we're doing at Toms of Maine. My timer's not going, so I'm just going to talk forever. No, I don't have 20 minutes. I wish I did. Okay. So I'm very excited to talk about the work we're doing at Toms of Maine to support the next generation of environmental leaders. We have a program called the Toms of Maine Incubator. And to back up, before I started at Toms of Maine, I worked in the environmental advocacy space for many years. And something that became very evident is that climate change is impacting marginalized and underrepresented communities disproportionately. And what became even more clear is that those communities were not at the table to develop the solutions. And so we developed the incubator program to support these emerging leaders. During the 6-month program, we provide $20,000 of funding to support their work. We connect them with mentors. We develop workshops to help them do their work. And we amplify them on our channels with our networks. Last year, we had 5 incredible leaders who are now in our alumni program. And we just announced our 2024 cohort earlier this year. Our hope is that we inspire more companies to work with young people, emerging leaders in really authentic ways. If you want to hear more about it, I will be at the party tonight. But I'm also very excited to introduce the panel. You can learn more about climate leaders. They'll talk about their work, but also about working with them. Please join me in welcoming Jacqueline, Naisha, Janelle, and our incubator alumni, Bodhi.
Hi, this is cool. My name is Jacqueline Lapointe. I am the director of the Climate Justice Organizing Hub, which is a support structure for grassroots activists across so-called Canada. And alongside me today are 3 incredible humans who are my friends and co-conspirators. But before I invite them to introduce themselves, I just want to set the table a little bit so you know what to expect in the next 40 minutes. So about a year ago, I was invited into the process of co-creating B Lab's Principles for Partnership with Frontline Communities. This was a very intentional, thoughtful process that spanned a whole year and so many minds and hearts of the B Lab community. So these principles are aimed to guide B Corp leaders on understanding how they can build trust-based, reciprocal, and long-lasting partnerships with frontline and grassroots communities, recognizing that for our collective survival, we're going to need to overthrow some systems here. We're going to need to reimagine how we do things. And I'm so excited about this panel because these young folks are going to bring the heat. And we're going to push the dial a little bit on what it means to reimagine business and reimagine the way we do things. So this panel is an invitation to lean into discomfort, an invitation to learn something new, to call into question your old ways of thinking and old ways of understanding things. And we know that there's a lot of good folks in this room doing incredible work on climate justice, and we recognize that and uplift you. And this session is not going to be self-congratulatory. This is going to be a session for us all to take the next step in our climate justice journeys. So without further ado, I'll invite our panelists, Janelle, Bodhi, and Naisha, to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you're from, and the community organizing work that you do.
Hey, Hadit, Zenhunzu, Dainta, hello, good day, how are you? Janelle Lapointe, Stepney, Stelatan Incas, Luxoyu Asli, Alu and Michelle Lapointe, Abba, Renee Lapointe, Atsu, Emma Baker, Atienne, Willie Baker. Hello, everybody. My name is Janelle Lapointe. I am from Stellarton First Nation, which is located right in the northern interior of so-called British Columbia. I'm Caribou Clan, and I had the immense privilege of just introducing you to my matrilineal line, my parents and my grandparents, as is protocol. My grandmother is a Dakath elder, a language teacher, a badass. And my grandfather, Willie Baker, the late Willie Baker, is a Black and Choctaw man from New Mexico State, United States. And I have had the pleasure of being an uninvited guest on these beautiful territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories for the past 5 years. And yeah, I wear a lot of hats in the environmental movement. I'm the co-lead of public engagement and mobilization at the David Suzuki Foundation. I do a lot of advocacy. I'm on the CBC Vancouver Climate Panel, which will be out tomorrow. And most recently, I started organizing with a new group called Common Horizon, who aims to fight for climate justice solutions that were really rooted in community and are not only going to advance our climate goals, but win solutions that actually make a difference in the lives of everyday people. So solutions that can undermine the economic crises and really recognize the interconnectedness of all of us. But all that's not important, because who I really am is a Stellarton Seke. I'm a woman from Slacko, a woman from the headwaters. And so what really informs my work is that I come from the headwaters that flow into the Slacko, the Fraser River, that flow right into the ocean. And therefore I have an immense responsibility to act in a way that I know trickles downstream. And it's just part of Stellarton principles to be one with nature. We're from a land that has all 4 harsh seasons. We're nomadic people, which means we really had to know the land. And yeah, I feel like that's the most important hat I wear and lens I bring into this work.
Janelle is a legend, and these 3 are some of my heroes in the climate justice space. Namaste, welcome everyone. My name is Bodhi Patil. I'm an ocean climate solutionist. That means I focus on bringing the voice of Mother Ocean into spaces like this and make sure that the ocean is represented across our planet. The ocean covers 70% of our planet. Our eldest ancestors are actually small photosynthesizing cyanobacteria and microplanktons in the ocean. So we have all evolved from the ocean, and that's why it's our shared responsibility to protect the common heritage site of humankind, which are the high seas, so biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, our coastal waters here and those high seas that we all share. And my ancestors were farmers from central India, where water meant life, Miniwichoni, as the Dakota people say. And it's really important to understand that water, all waterways, from the tops of the mountains, from the rivers and streams, from the sacred headwaters, flow into the ocean, and the ocean connects us all. And that's why we all have a specific role to play in ocean advocacy. After graduating high school, I co-created an organization called Ocean Uprise, meant to get young people off the streets and onto the reefs, meant to educate young people about ocean conservation and their role to play in understanding that the ocean and water, sacred waterways, touch each and every single one of us, touch all of you here, because our body is made out 70% of our waters. The one thing that we need in each and every single one of our cells is water to survive. That's why it's not only a sacred entity and resource, it's a mobilizing power. And so with community advocacy, with Ocean Uprise, we mobilize young people all around the world to take action to protect the ocean, whether that's beach cleanups and community-driven development, whether that's supporting women-led businesses that are focused on ocean literacy, or working at the highest levels of ocean governance and finance with the United Nations. We support all people, especially young people, to get their foot in the door, to protect the ocean, to protect the high seas, because it's our common heritage site. I'm also on the United Nations Ocean Decade Board for ecosystem restoration, specifically for connecting people to the ocean. And the ocean is just our eldest ancestor and a reminder for all of us to connect and remember that we all come from her. So understanding that we all have a critical role to play, as everyone here has shared, in protecting our common heritage site is going to be something really important that all B Corps think, because ocean health, is inextricably linked to human health, and we need to make sure that waterways and the ocean are integrated into every single system because everything upstream flows downstream. You can see it here when you look across to the two sister mountains. You can see it here across our beautiful ecosystems. And we have to understand that we are living in an interconnected system and that we need young people, we need Gen Z at the forefront of this movement, advocating for policy and helping to set the new agenda for the ocean, because the future of the ocean conservation movement is young, it's diversified, it's us.
Oh, what good intros. How can I ever follow? But hi, everybody. My name is Naisha. I'm really, really grateful to be here. Excited to be joining these three lovely people on this panel today. I am a co-founder of Climate Recentered. I'm a co-founder of Change Course, formerly called Banking on a Better Future, and I currently work as a co-op developer at Solid State Community Industries. And so a little bit about what I do and what I've been involved with. So Climate Recentered is a movement of BIPOC youth from so-called Surrey that uses community organizing to connect people to each other and build a better world for all, with communities of color leading the charge. We center joy and creativity to grow a movement that is sustainable and welcoming to all, especially those who are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. And you can see some pictures on their next slide, because we're really trying to implement joy in our practice. So we actually held a community festival. There's a lot of thought and research and community engagement that went into this. This is actually the byproduct of a summer of engaging with over 400 residents of so-called Surrey, people who had never been engaged before. We had a Mehndi night to talk to aunties. We had a basketball tournament to talk to high school boys. It was quite a process, but the byproduct of it was community and joy. And we actually ended up having over 15 businesses come, local Surrey artists come perform, all of these things in a place that is supposedly called the most dangerous city in Canada. But to me, seeing kids chalk and draw and play is not representative of danger. And so we're really trying to build microcosms of a better world through a community, because a resilient community, is resilient to climate. A strong community is able to deal with issues of climate crises. And in my work, I also try to take this into the work that I do as a co-op developer, specifically building worker co-ops, trying to build what we call the solidarity economy. An economy that works for everyone, because everyone here knows business is not conducive to community. And so building alternatives to that, and trying to build a better world.
Amazing. Thank you so much, you three, for sharing your intros. And now, as we get into the bulk of this session, I just want to do a little bit more framing. So yeah, I think we're just going to start with this idea that the relationship between frontline and grassroots communities and businesses can be very fraught for very valid reasons. The extractive and exploitative norms that have gotten us to the level of crises that we face on so many fronts, these are not norms that frontline and grassroots communities want to be rubbing shoulders with. And so as we reflect on the fossil fuel supremacy that Severin was talking about, and the systems of oppression of racism, capitalism, and colonialism, and how we're up against such huge vested powers, we know that we need to come together for our collective survival and liberation. But how do we do that across differences? And how do we do that in the face of harm that has been done to frontline and grassroots communities for so long? So the question that I'm going to launch to the panelists, and this time we'll start with Naisha, and then Janelle, and then finish off with Bodhi. The question I want to ask you folks is, as a grassroots organizer, what do you want B Corp leaders to know about working together?
Yeah, great question. And also just quickly wanted to say Ramadan Mubarak to anyone who's observing, as I am today. And I want to start by saying I am both simultaneously the biggest pessimist you will meet and the biggest optimist. As much distrust as I have for institutions, for big business, for capitalism, I have love for my community. I have overwhelming joy and care that I practice. But I will say I am a business student, a full-time business student, who has no faith in capitalism. I am a Bengali person who has witnessed the colonization of my people and how that has actually led to colonization of people all around the world. How that has led to Western and British imperialism. I believe in a better world, and I'm sure many of you do today, and you're here today to understand a little bit more of that. But I want to push you to ask, for whom is your better world and who is building it? So much of what I believe in terms of a better world, and I practice and I love and I have care and I want all people to, but I really want people to challenge what that means. I want you to challenge what safety and what community looks like and what it feels like. My family is from Bangladesh, like I've mentioned, and Bangladesh is one of the places that is going to be most affected by the climate crisis, but that is purposeful, that is intentional. That is so much of what is wrong with our system today. And what I want to implore people to explore is this idea of degrowth. Frontline communities and grassroots communities believe in degrowth. Do not believe in climate solutions that replicate capitalism and colonialism. Building a better world cannot continue as normal. Business cannot continue as normal. We cannot just have eco-friendly capitalism. We cannot have philanthropic capitalism. We cannot have millionaires or billionaires save us, because these are not just false solutions and ineffective solutions. These are solutions that cause harm to the marginalized, cause harm to indigenous and racialized people, the people who not just are protecting and upholding our systems, but have the solutions themselves. I think a lot about my family in Bangladesh and how the local fishermen would come to my door and ask and shout, I'm gonna shout in Bangla a little bit, but Mas, and would come with these locally caught fish, and we would buy what was in season. We'd buy fruit that was in season. The bottom 10% of wealth are people who contribute 0.2% of emissions. The top 10% of people with wealth, the top 10 wealthiest, are people who contribute 50% of emissions. It's these systems, this wealth inequality, of hoarding of wealth, that are creating these systems. I want you to consider in your better world things like electric vehicles. Are your electric vehicles funded and mined using lithium that is extracted through colonial practices? Are you using coltan that is used in the colonization of the Congo right now? I want you to ask if your reusable tote bags are funded and made by slave labor, or are made by the children of Bangladesh. Right now I'm wearing a shirt that was made in Bangladesh. Unlike me, I was born here and made here. But I think a lot about the fibers of this sweater and the fact that I bought it here, and how me and this sweater are both the byproducts of colonialism, of how our fibers are intertwined of a story of capitalism and extraction and power imbalances. Like I mentioned, a lot of the people who are disproportionately affected by solutions or by these false solutions are indigenous people who protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. Also, if we look at the fact that North America needs 4 Earths to sustain itself, when India only needs 1. We can see how practices practiced by people who are the wealthy are actually the issues and the reasons why we're in the state that we are today. And so it is impossible to exist the way we are currently. We cannot innovate, we cannot solve these problems today with technology that doesn't exist. We cannot innovate ourselves, we can't business plan ourselves out of the climate crisis. The solutions that we need cannot be funded by child and slave labor. They cannot be funded by colonization. They cannot be funded by capitalism. They cannot be replications and must dismantle the very systems. I understand that as much as we exist in capitalism, we must also dismantle it. And this is not just something we say, it's not just a land acknowledgement, it's not just, it's so much more, it's so much practice. Everything that we do, the way that we breathe, the way that we dream, the way that we eat, right now for me as a settler colonizer, is representative of colonialism. I would not be eating the way that I eat. I would not be breathing. I would not be sleeping. I'm disenfranchised from my body. I'm disenfranchised from the way I'm supposed to be working, from all of these different ways because of colonialism. And I want us to understand that decolonization is a practice and it involves everything that we do. Right now, I'm sitting here a little bit shocked by the fact and the size of this conference. As grateful as I am to have this platform, sitting here in the Vancouver Convention Center, being able to see the wealth that went into this conference and all of the effort, and as much as there was effort and care and planning, I also think about the decampments happening today, this morning, the past few weeks in Crab Park. I think about how disconnected right now it feels to be here talking in a microphone while there's communities being affected. I think a lot about how these solutions that we present are disconnected from the people who are actually solving and creating microcosms of the world that we want to try to create. I will wrap up quickly, but I also want to say representation is not justice. Representation can be even a tool for oppression and colonialism. And so do not just think about who's sitting here, where you're sitting, but think about your systems deeply and constructively. And do it with the love and care, obviously, but challenge your idea of comfort, challenge your idea of a better world, because comfort is not where growth happens. So I'll end there.
Thank you, Naisha, for giving the gift of honesty to this room. I think we all appreciate that. And for those of you who are feeling maybe a little bit of that discomfort knocking at your door, I invite you to take a deep breath and just lean into it. Janelle.
Hey, yeah, thank you, Naisha, for that truth-telling. I really believe you are an example of love in practice, and I'm a big fan of you in Climate Recentered, and I stand by that basketball tournament being the most strategic and loving organizing I've seen for the past few years. What critical times we're in. It's a time where people are starting to wake up to the realities of these emerging crises and the systems that are at play that got us here. People are aware of the extreme inequities that we're seeing, the fact that we have billionaires that continue to make record profits even though everyday people are suffering. And starting to make the connection between the climate crisis and the affordability crisis and the drug poisoning crisis, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my question I have is why do we do the work why are we committed to dismantling the systems? Why do we want to do better? And I ask that because I think a lot of people, and I know the B Corp movement is really led by morals and values, and that's really incredible. It's really needed. But sometimes, because the systems that we are a part of that are causing so much suffering and harm in this world, they're unrelenting. And when we're not being unrelenting back, force for good back, it's so easy to fall into the norms of our system. So I see a lot of people that are engaging with anti-racism, with decolonization, with reconciliation. And I'm so happy that those people are now showing up at the table and they're waking up to the need to do that deep, important work. But I feel as though some people haven't answered the why deeper than it's the right thing to do. Or haven't answered the why do you do the work other than it helps absolve my guilt. Or that doing good feels good. And I read something on my way to this conference which kind of summed up the message I wanted to bring today, and it said, something along the lines as solidarity is not just intention. And I know that a lot of you have been living in the intention space, and I'm so grateful that all the programming today has gotten us here, where you've heard lots about fossil fuel supremacy and colonialism, and you have an intention to do better. But solidarity is not intention. It's an unrelentless, not only pursuit of justice, but a pursuit to stop injustices. And so I agree with Naisha. I feel a little bit uncomfortable to be up here talking about justice where there's grave injustice happening against our unhoused neighbors mere blocks away in so-called Vancouver. I always feel uncomfortable about being an Indigenous person that gets to have a microphone in my hand when there's so many Indigenous people that are disregarded in our society. And my mom said something really poignant to me a few years ago when she was starting to notice that, wow, there's a lot of talk about reconciliation, and wow, like everyone does land acknowledgements. Like that's something so new that she hasn't experienced in her lifetime. But she says even though there's hyper visibility about the problem of colonialism, she walks down the street and smiles at people, and people don't even want to make eye contact with her. And so I'm gonna, again, ask us all to lean into this discomfort, because I know there's people in this room who understand colonialism, who are committed to reconciliation, but don't have any close relationships with Indigenous people in their life, who would also be a little bit nervous if there was an Indigenous person trying to talk to them on the street, who feel uncomfortable about showing up at Indigenous events because they're scared they might say or do the wrong thing. And that fear and that ego is really getting in our way of creating a powerful movement for justice. And I always tell people I'm from a small northern community that has, I always consider it really a microcosm of capitalism. I think my homelands are so beautiful, they're so abundant. You can read early writings from the settlers that first arrived on our territory, and they all speak about just how abundant, how smart our people were with the land, and just the numbers of people on their land. Of course, now those numbers have been decimated because of the diseases that were brought from settled colonialism, the ongoing violence on our nation. And I still consider them to be really beautiful and abundant lands despite 150 years plus of colonization. But I grew up without clean drinking water, even though the town 5 minutes away was able to drink from the tap. The Highway of Tears, where Indigenous women and girls go missing or murdered, runs right through my territory alongside the CN and CP railway tracks that were forced through the territory. I've seen, in my short lifetime, I'm just about 28 years old, I've seen time and time again extraction boom and busts, from forestry to mining, and now with LNG and other fossil fuel products. And yet, there's still more people willing to do engagement from the fossil fuel companies. They're happy to come into my community and have dinner and have conversations, where people who are progressive and say they're on my side and are telling me they understand the importance of reconciliation are too afraid to show up because they're too afraid of being offensive. And so my call for the B Corp movement is to not let our ego and fear get in our own way. Start making those reciprocal relationships, and it could be as simple as showing up to the events in your community, introducing yourself to the leaders. We have hundreds and hundreds of sovereign Indigenous nations across Canada, US, Turtle Island, and all of them, they are the only people on this continent who have been able to survive on these lands sustainably, because everyone else has made an absolute mess of these lands and waterways we depend on. And so they have the knowledge that is going to get us through this tumultuous time. And it starts today with just being able to make relationships with the leader. And I can't tell you what reciprocity or reconciliation looks like, because there's hundreds of distinct sovereign nations. And my invitation is for you to go and do that work. We have gone so far with the awareness piece of the struggles of Black and Indigenous and racialized folks in this country, and we also have racialized scholars, academics, people who sit on the UN chair, people who get up on stage like me, people who put out papers, who have created the United Nations Declaration Rights of Indigenous People. The work is out there, and it's time for us to just pull our boots up and get into those communities and make that happen. And I just wanted to finish with a story because I know people sometimes feel like, oh, like what does land back actually mean? Or if Indigenous people are really sovereign nations, does that mean we're kicked out of these lands? And my community, there's a long story about when settlers arrived on our lands and the people actually deciding whether they were going to let people in or if they were going to fight them off. And back then, like I said, we had the numbers, we had the knowledge of the land, we could have done it if we wanted to. But that vote was held, and it was overwhelmingly decided that we were going to let newcomers into our community and to see what we can do for one another, because that was the way we operated with nations all around us. And so that invitation is still on the table. Don't let it pass by. We want to see what we can do with each other. We have gifts to bring, and those nations have the critical knowledge we need. I hope that people in this room know what it's like to be a good friend, know what it's like to be in reciprocity, at least starting with the personal relationships in our life. Use that knowledge and take it into the communities and do that work.
A very beautiful call to action. Thank you so much, Janelle. And yeah, this idea of not letting our egos get in the way of us taking action and building relationships, and recognizing that building relationships is something that is so innate and inherent to us. We've all made a friend before. I do want to very quickly plug that the principles for partnership with Frontline communities will be publicly available come April 22nd on the B Lab US and Canada website on the Climate Justice landing page. And in those principles, we explore a lot of the themes that Naisha and Janelle have covered so far, and that I'm sure Bodhi will also get into. So, Bodhi, over to you.
Nature has no ego, and Mother Ocean is incredibly resilient. And we have to make sure that the voice of nature, that the voice of the ocean, that Indigenous peoples, that traditional stewards are represented within C-suite and executive boards of companies. We need to make sure nature has not only a seat at the table, but is the table. We need to make sure that Gen Z, which represents 30% of the global population, is also at decision-making tables, because we are going to be the table. We are the largest consumer demographic. So when we speak about intergenerational justice, when we look to find programs for reconciliation, that means also making sure we're respecting and protecting future ancestors. We are future ancestors, and the 1.6 billion people between the ages of 16 to 24 that aren't on the stage with us, that we're representing right here because that's one of our roles, are also fighting for justice in their communities. And when we look at the ocean, and when we learn from the wisdom of traditional stewards, of Polynesian ocean-going peoples, of canoe cultures, of sailors, of voyagers, of ancestral folks that would navigate from the stars, we learn a really important lesson around resilience, around the ability to survive through very traumatic events and come out even stronger. And when we look towards this key message around resilience and climate resiliency, we can better inform sustainable business practices that aren't just meeting our traditional ESG standards, that are really taking the next step. So I want to encourage all of you to do 3 really important actions. Number 1 is, first of all, raise your hand if you have a young folk within your C-suite or executive board right now. Okay. So we got 4 folks. Raise your hand if you think that having a young person on your board or in your C-suite position or in a leadership role within your B Corp or company is extremely important for the next generation of consumers for our entire planet. Okay, I should see every hand raised, people. Raise them high. I want to make sure that when we are including and representing Gen Z, when we are including future ancestors, when we are speaking about reconciliation, we are actually doing what's needed within companies, within boards, within investment platforms to resource, to finance, and to support the next generation leading solutions. Right now, as a student at the University of British Columbia, as a 21-year-old mixed-race individual that only is on this planet to represent the ocean and make sure her voice is heard in all spaces, there are so many incredible innovations that B Corps can implement from young people. And whether that's supporting new technologies that are helping to track illegal fishing and help mitigate slave labor on fishing vessels, whether that's educational programs to get more kids on the water connected to their ancestry, connected to their roots, whether that's educational programs through the David Suzuki program that so many folks here are championing. We need to make sure we're resourcing these youth-led organizations, these intergenerational, indigenous, and women and BIPOC-led organizations to actually do the work that's necessary. Because just a fraction of 1% of all climate finance goes towards climate justice work, and the ocean has a $150 billion funding gap when it comes down to meeting the needs of SDG 14, life below water. So if we're really gonna focus on justice, I wanna see commitments from B Corps, from companies, from leaders, which you all are. That's why you're here today, to represent your companies, your visions, that you're gonna resource young people, that you're gonna bring in young people, you're gonna bring in all people, you're gonna bring in historically marginalized and underrepresented people to your board. I wanna see next year at this conference, every single person raising their hand when I ask, do you have a young person or an intergenerational steward that's represented in your board or C-suite? Because that's what we need in order to get to the climate resilient future that we all dream of. And I'll just end on a note. When I close my eyes and when I think of a regenerative future, when I think about a future that we live in harmony with nature, that we are nature, that we are bringing to the ocean, we are bringing nature into the room because we are inherently a part of her. I think of resilience, I think of love, think of peace, harmony, and justice. And when we focus on these components, which you all are doing and which you need to accelerate, and which you all now have a mission to accelerate and plant seeds in the hearts and minds of others, then we're gonna get to that just and equitable vision that we all have been dreaming up of that has so many barriers to access. So please make a commitment and go ahead and raise your hands if you're gonna say, you know, I'm gonna support a young person, whether it's mentorship, whether it's providing a paid internship, or whether it's helping them to raise up their leadership capacity for next year so that they can help be the ones to be redistributing both power and wealth. So go ahead and raise your hands. I hope to see every single hand raised, both committing on an individual and company level. Please take a picture. And thank you guys for prioritizing that.
Amazing. So you folks have heard a few very clear calls to action. And just as we wrap up this panel, I'm going to invite the panelists to, for the purpose of pedagogy and just hammering home the takeaways that they want you to leave today with, I'm going to invite the panelists to just, synthesize what you're hoping every individual in this room will walk away with today. And if you folks are interested in diving deeper into these themes, we will, myself, Kylie, Raj, and a number of other wonderful humans at B Lab will be hosting a breakout tomorrow afternoon on these themes as well, so come join us there. But yeah, just back over to the panelists, just to continue the momentum, we're gonna start with Bodhi, and then Naisha, and finish off with Janelle. What do you want folks to leave with today? My mom grew up in Kitimat, close to the Great Bear Rainforest, and I learned one thing in my life: respect women. Orcas and the southern resident killer whales are matriarchal, and there are 73 southern resident killer whales that are endangered species here in the Salish Sea that we have to protect. The one thing that I want to leave you all with is respect women and respect the matriarchy, because that is exactly what's going to get us to our regenerative future that we need. And there's so much we can learn from nature when we actually look and channel her in each and every one of ourselves. Thank you.
I love that. You're so enthusiastic. It just like resonates with the group. I'm gonna say my last piece is that if we want climate justice, we have to have a free Palestine. I know that B Lab and B Corp hasn't issued any official statement, and so I would implore that if we actually want to achieve a free and just world, that freedoms for calls for a free Palestine are calls for freedom everywhere. They're calls for free from capitalism, from Western imperialism, from colonialism, and from all of these different things and systems of oppression. You can see the connections of climate in Palestine from both just the way that Palestinian people honor and respect the land, particularly through olive trees. You can see how these trees have lived for centuries at the hands of Palestinian people. From the actual bombings that have released so many emissions to the fact that there's oil in Gaza that will likely be used to further the climate crisis. Also to the fact that this is representative of the ability of Western powers to take advantage of indigenous people and indigenous land. And so calls for free Palestine, call for climate justice, call for migrant justice, and all of these different issues, this is what justice looks like. I don't feel justice necessarily when I'm here. I feel it when I'm in the community at protests, calling on powers and doing all of this different work. So again, reinvent and reimagine what a better world looks like to you, and who's in that world, who's building that world. Hope is a practice. And care is a practice. It's not just easy work. It requires discomfort, like we've mentioned. It is hard. It's not meant to be easy, because if it was easy, we would have already done it. So take care of yourselves, take care of your community, and take care of each other. Free Palestine.
Yeah, I'm just going to say you have time to do this work. We have been plagued by urgency and scarcity, not only to create these systems of oppression, but it's been plaguing the environmental movement, progressive movements. Just because the climate crisis is here and now doesn't mean it's time to panic. We come from a long legacy of ancestors that survived to get us here. We come from a long legacy of movements for change. You have time to do this work. You have time to be strategic. You have time to find a young person to sit on your table. You have time to go meet with the indigenous leaders in your community. We all know what urgency feels like, whether you've packed a bag last minute, whether you're late for work, trying to get your kids out the door. Head to toe, that feels bad on the nervous system. So why would we replicate that in our businesses, in our movements, in any space? We have time, we have more than enough resources. So I invite you to take all the calls to action you've heard today, make time for it, and make room for it.
Janelle, Bodhi, Naisha, y'all are amazing. Thank you so much.
Big round of applause for the beautiful work our young people are doing. So much love and respect. Come on through. Yeah. Naisha, Bodhi, Janelle, and Jacqueline. Thank you so much.